On this episode, we once again invite renowned corporate speaker and author Azran Osman-Rani to share his point of views on the topic of performance management and how possibly this is outdated and perhaps a waste of time and effort versus its desired outcome. Assalamualaikum and welcome to 2025. We are so happy to be back again. We're looking forward to another exciting year. And in this season 3, as you all know, we have been continuing on with the theme, basically inviting our guests or even sharing our point of views on certain topics which we feel are relevant to the audience. And we are happy to see the feedback through the comments that have been given, encouraging us to do more. Now, today, we have the opportunity of inviting a guest who was featured early on in season 1, Azran Osman-Rani, who is a good friend of mine. He's also a certified executive coach like I am. But more importantly, he's someone who has constantly, made efforts to break boundaries, share his thoughts, and has become very much a renowned speaker on the corporate circle. So today we invited Azran back for this episode, where we're going to ask him to share some point of views on topics which may be relevant for the early part of the year in the corporate world. For example, it's a time of year when we are planning the year ahead. We are evaluating our performance for the previous year to benchmark ourselves for the future. Last time around, in the earlier episode, I touched on this book that Azran has written, 30 Days and 30 Years, but we didn't touch on subjects within the book itself because it was more about him as a leader. So today, this episode is really about touching on some of the points that he raised in his book, which I hope will be good food for thought for us. So Azran, welcome back to Cuba Cerita.
Oh, thank you very much for having me again, Azwan.
It's a pleasure because, and again, thank you for your support.
Sure.
But it's a real pleasure to have you because, nothing beats having someone who we believe can really share sound points of views on subjects which are, either through experience or learnings of others. Mm-hmm. So that's really where we are. I was particularly, if I can just dive straight into the book, I was particularly interested in a few topics in this book, which I feel are relevant to our audience. And, and I know since our last episode, you've come up with the revised version, a new cover and all, and I'm sure there are some updates that you will share. But maybe if I dive straight into it, can I just maybe ask you to share a few pointers around how companies can plan their business better, how they can look into hiring people of a certain nature. And I think the key topic for today's session is really about performance management systems.
Oh, okay.
And how you, in very polite words, said it's really a waste of time.
Yes. The way it's been traditionally done.
Okay. Qualify that. All right. So, maybe let's begin. If I can, you have a chapter here where you say, bet on the team, not the business plan.
Yep.
And how corporations maybe can incorporate these principles.
Sure.
So tell us a bit more why this thought came up and this point of view came about.
Well, let me start with this principle of a lot of people, when you ask them why they do certain things, the answer is because that's how we always do things. As opposed to reflecting to say, is that still effective and relevant in today's day and age?
Okay.
One key practice is this annual planning process. It's a big ritual. People spend months, and if you count the man hours and man days, it is a lot of time. And yet we all know today we live in an era where in January you have no idea what's going to happen to the world by February or March, let alone for the year, right? We've seen how wars, whether it's Russia invading Ukraine, the Israel-Palestine issue, how it affects the ringgit. With Trump becoming a president, what's going to be the effect of tariff barriers? How will China respond? So therefore, when you sit in your little corporate sphere, thinking you can plan out the year, even if you say I've got an optimistic case, base case, pessimistic case, you tend to narrow and define your key assumptions, principles, actions. This has a tendency to create tunnel vision, because you spend so much time invested in crafting your plan, you tend to be so focused on executing the plan. In fact, many companies, for the whole 11 months after that, they're so focused on this one column. It's called variance to budget, right? Oh, how are we going against plan? What are we doing about these deviations? You're so tunnel vision, you're missing out on the new things that are happening on the periphery, which have a potential to completely disrupt and upend your entire business. So there can be a danger in planning. People used to say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yes.
But sometimes planning can lead to failure
Okay.
when it is so focused on, the business plan. My alternative is to say, well, you can write a plan, but what's more important that I don't see many companies do enough on is not what the plan says, but who is going to execute the plan, right? Who is this team? Right now, you, for example, sit on boards, right? And you go through a lot of annual plans. But imagine if boards put as much rigor on who exactly will be the leader of this initiative, whether it's a new product launch, new market entry, right? Do they have the curiosity to look at things from different angles? Do they have the humility to know when things are not going well and they need to change? Do they have the courage and resilience to persevere through all the setbacks and challenges? These are very important metrics that you don't see boards and top management teams spend anywhere near the effort to rigorously assess, is this the right team? So that whatever happens externally, this team can pivot, adjust, and adapt accordingly. Wouldn't that be more important than the plan itself?
But at the same time, say for example, strategic plans. Very much the practice is, okay, the CEO will lead management and devise those strategies, present it to the board endorses and approves it, maybe tweaks it here, tweaks it there. But then it's all about, okay, now execute that plan, right? But if we're talking about reversing it slightly and saying, okay, have we got the right people to actually execute a plan? We can't be changing our people all the time either, right?
Yeah, but the point is to be more focused on this is the right people and they need to flex that plan. So don't be so hard on the plan because the plan is going to change.
Yes.
But you better as well choose the right team who can navigate it, right? But when you're so focused on the plan, right, you're like, hey, we said we're going to achieve this much sales by this quarter and we're down, right? What's happening? And you're therefore so focused on short-term 3 months, 6 months, and you might be missing, for example, how can generative AI completely upend your entire business, right? Or new digital disruptors, right? That can come in and operate at 10% of your costs. Not 10% cheaper, but 10% of your costs, right? And therefore radically change how your customers are going to purchase your product, right? These things are happening at the rate of weeks, not years, right? And so the annual plan can actually be a crutch, especially when you layer on top of it the 3 to 5 year strategic plan, right? Can any board honestly say you have a clue as to what's going to happen in your industry in 3 years' time?
So are you saying maybe we should be thinking about having shorter plans? Or okay, from your experience, what did you see works better versus these annual plans?
So having an annual plan by itself is not necessarily a bad thing. It's useful to at least say, hey, today, this is our view on what we think we can do. But my argument is to not be so fixated on it. You've got to learn how to flex and change the plan. I.e., for example, that's why this book is called 30 Days and 30 Years. To specifically say, not 1 year or 3 to 5 years, but every 30 days, what needs to change, what has changed about external environment, what should we add, what should we take out, what are we doing enough experiments. I'll give you one model, right? Typically when people do these annual plans, they have whether a strategy offsite, brainstorming session, right, where you come up with different ideas for growth. Then you know what you do? You prioritize.
Yes.
You put it into this matrix. It's got two axes, right? Like
Yes.
value, size of opportunity, ease of implementation.
Yep.
Let's pick the 5 or the 10 young, highest impact, easiest to execute, lowest risk.
Okay.
Right? What you've done is you've somehow narrowed it down to the obvious, least risky things. My contention is boards shouldn't be doing that at the planning stage. In fact, I should ask the reverse question. Are you making enough bets? Are you pursuing at least 100 different initiatives? If you stress test any management team, coming up with 10 to 20 new growth ideas is not hard. Coming up with number 80, number 93, number 99 is really hard. You got to really stretch and come up with almost improbable ideas. But here's the thing. Make small bets. In 3 months, in 6 months, you realize 20 of those ideas are not working out. Redouble the efforts, reallocate resources to the ones that show promise. You'll be very surprised because you now are starting from 100 and you're constantly changing. You'll find things that you never knew were viable at the start. Let me share one example.
Okay.
So I'm the kind of first or early outside investor for this fintech company called Money Match.
All right.
Okay. So the name Money Match, right, comes from this initial problem statement. Let's say you want to go on a holiday in Australia, right? And you want to buy 1,000 Australian dollars for your shopping, eating in Australia. So you go to the money exchanger, right? And let's say the currency rate is 3 ringgit to $1. They're not going to sell it to you at 3,000 ringgit, right? They're going to sell it to you at probably 3,100 ringgit. They make a markup, right? And let's say you go to Australia and you only spend $800. You're coming back with $200 that you didn't use. You don't want to hold on to 200 Australian dollars. So you want to change it back to ringgit, right? They're not going to sell it to you at 3 or 3.1. They're going to sell it to you at 2.9, right?
Yes.
Because they always make a spread. So Money Match's initial idea was, could we create a platform where we match the people who want to buy the Australian dollars with the people who are coming back and want to change back Australian dollars so that both can match at 3.0.
Right.
Very interesting problem, right?
Okay.
But what's the revenue model? I don't know how you can make money from it. Now, a traditional business looking at that idea will say, that's not a good idea because I can't see the cash flow when this is going to break even and all that, so we don't do that, right? But to me, I was very interested in the 2 founders, Nathan and Adrian, who came up with the idea. Number one, they're actually very experienced currency people, like Goldman Sachs, Forex, some of the other banks. And they, I believe, had the curiosity and imagination. They started there. Today, Money Match transacts billions of ringgit in international remittance, nothing to do with the original idea. But they learn, they pivoted, they adapt, they realize, the unseen segment is the SME market, right? Let's say if you're a travel agent, you need to send money for a counterpart for tours in China, right? If I send it to the bank, what's the bank going to charge me? How can I do that at a much, much lower rate, right? And they wouldn't have discovered that final business model if they were not willing to start, try out, learn, adapt, right? Now imagine if you apply this to a big company. So the question is not, have you come up with the one great idea or 5 great ideas, but are you making 100 bets, right? Because you don't know which one of that 100 is going to be the real game changer for the company.
But wouldn't companies maybe think along the lines, again, I'm trying to think from where I sit, they would say, okay, there is this main business that we are focused on, annually, targets and all that. But aside to that, we have this sort of incubation stroke, new business ideas stream, which maybe goes along those lines of Money Match.
So here's a challenge with that.
Okay.
It's what I call the curse of pilot projects.
Okay.
Right? Because you want to be innovative. You want to take experiments, right?
Okay.
But you park it in the side. You don't disrupt your core business.
Okay.
Right? And so, of course, a good, interesting example was a former company I used to work with, Astro.
Okay.
Right? You might know of companies like Netflix, iFlix, who've come in, video streaming, who've really challenged the idea that satellite TV is relevant. Like, why do you need a set-top box, satellite dishes, and all of that, right? Now, it turns out Astro was the pioneer in internet and mobile television years before iFlix and Netflix came to the market.
Oh.
Right? So they were willing to make interesting experiments. It was called Astro on the Go. I think now it's being shortened to Astro Go.
Yeah.
Years before iFlix.
Oh.
But they treated it as a pilot project.
Okay.
Like, you still need your 100 ringgit satellite TV subscription
Okay.
before I give you that mobile subscription.
Wow.
But because you're so focused on quarterly earnings, that Astro Go never got the light of day, right? Because you're
Until
not
much later lah.
Yeah, but till today,
Yeah. Still.
a huge majority of Astro's revenue is still
Still.
traditional business because you don't have the courage to really upend it. So here's the danger of, we do all these experiments, we do something in generative AI, we do something in digital, but let's not disrupt our core business. Because guess what? If you don't disrupt your core business, someone else is going to do it.
True. But going back to that example of Money Match, I think you bet on those two guys.
Yeah, the people.
The people.
Right?
People.
Do they have the curiosity, the humility, the resilience,
Yeah.
right? To learn faster than the competition.
Yeah.
Right? And we got other investors eventually to come in, and Money Match now is growing from strength to strength.
And talking about people,
Mm-hmm.
you have a chapter here where you talk about hiring for curiosity and purposefulness.
Right.
You hire people who are curious, and being curious is part of the hiring process.
Yes.
And the first step is to actually apply curiosity to the hiring process.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Tell
Let
us
me
more.
expand on that.
Yeah.
You know what? Most of us, right? When you interview someone to join your team, you probably spend an hour or so, right,
Okay.
assessing this candidate. You might not know this, but you've made your decision in the first 10 seconds. Oftentimes, before that candidate said a single word, your brain, our brains are so intuitive, right?
Yes.
I look at your face, I already decided. I might not know I've decided consciously,
I
but
like you.
subconsciously, I've already decided, right? Sometimes you look at a CV, it automatically biases you. Do I like this person or not, right? And you spend the next 59 minutes and 50 seconds, basically your brain is only retaining information that confirms that gut instinct and filtering out anything that goes against that gut instinct. So my point is that interview part is actually very ineffective. You're probably only 50% accurate.
The way that we do it.
The way that you do it, right?
Okay.
You might as well just flip a coin. However, okay? Once you've made that hiring decision,
Okay.
and let's say that person's worked with you for 3 months,
All right.
typically we have that probation period again.
Okay.
After someone's worked with you for 3 months, now you're 90% accurate whether that person was actually a good hire or not. Because you've seen them work, you've seen them interact with your colleagues, how they, fit into the company culture, all right? But how many people at that 3-month point went back to their hiring notes to say, what was the basis that I hired this person? Was that criteria right or wrong? Did that actually materialize as I thought this person would?
So maybe the criteria up front also needs to be examined.
That's why you got to be very curious with your hiring process. For example, right? I've so many personal examples where either at that particular point, I'm so, I might have had a board meeting where my board members were really pushing me on numbers, and I find a candidate who's very analytical or appears analytical. I like this person. This person's going to help me, right? Or maybe I'm really struggling with marketing, and I find someone who's sort of confident and outspoken. I'm immediately attracted to that criteria. But you realize at that point, someone might be confident and articulate in an interview. Would that necessarily translate to being confident and articulate for when they actually join your team? Maybe, maybe not, right? Some people put on a great show
During an interview.
but may not, come up. But maybe there are ways that we can assess that is more meaningful, but we need to actually approach it with real data, as in at every 3-month period, right? Go back. Which decisions you made or evaluation criteria was actually effective, it actually could statistically predict whether someone's going to be successful or not and which ones don't. For example, the level of energy and enthusiasm that the people that I interviewed with turned out to be a very poor statistical predictor of whether they actually exhibit energy and enthusiasm when they join my team.
Oh.
Right? We don't know this because, but if you actually measure, let's say, okay, in 1 year I make 30 to 50 hires, I can go back and realize, that question, that wasn't a great question, right? I have this gut feeling, I want someone who's energized and all that. But some people, they're not quick to say yes. They need more time to think and reflect. But they're deep and they really are, strong people in delivery. Where some people might just be enthusiastic, yay. Then when they join,
you don't see that.
They barely even show up to work.
Maybe nowadays with the the use of psychometric assessments. Do you rely on those?
So my point is not to just take any tool at face value.
All right.
But the simple part is whether you use it or not.
Okay.
3 months time, check.
Reassess. Okay.
Right? Okay, let's say your psychometric tool would say certain criteria. Now you've got 3 months of real life data, right? Like this person's actually working. Did that manifest or not? How come we're not doing that? Most of us don't do it. I think it's a massive untapped opportunity to not do a proper 3-month assessment, not just in terms of, okay, this candidate, do I want to confirm or not, but to use that point to say, was my selection criteria good or not?
And I see in your book one thing which is good. You actually you actually state a lot of cases where unfortunately you hired wrongly too.
Oh yes, I made
and
catastrophic
quite
hiring
telling.
decisions. Yes.
And I guess from where you sat in those times, you were actually able to, how would I say, move that person away, or not continue on with that hire. I think that's another point. Nowadays, we are so concerned about, okay, number one, you go through that process of, selecting, shortlisting, hiring, and at some point in future, unless it's a catastrophe, are you really willing to part ways?
Yeah, okay. That's a very good point, right? That's why, number one, that 3-month decision is really critical, right? Because you do have a good decision.
Yeah.
But let's say you've joined, someone might have joined you for 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. I'll give you one real life example.
Okay.
So I also I'm a non-executive director for a fund management company.
Okay.
And there's an executive director who's been in the company for over 20 years. Clearly, within a couple of years, is very clear to the board, underperforming, right? And, the CEO said, oh, you know what? I think, we're going to have to do something about it. What are you going to do? Oh, first let me get legal counsel, A legal counsel said, okay, kena buat betul-betul. You have to do 6 months PIP, right?
Yeah.
Performance Improvement Plan. You, in fact, went to 2 cycles before you collect data. And right up front, I said, you know what? These sorts of cases, you sit down with the guy and say, look, they're not working. What's it going to take for you to step down, right? Maybe you need to offer that person a 12-month separation package, right? Most people, I think, at 12 months will think if they know they're not going to fit, right? His reaction was, oh, but that means we're rewarding underperformance. That's not good, right? But the net result, by the way, was it took over 2 years to exit that person. So now you're paying 24 months, and that person is still in that company, cancerous in terms of the culture for the team underneath this person, right? What's the cost of that?
Yeah.
Right? Versus going, look, not everything you must quote unquote follow by the book or employment law, right? It is because if you go up to a person and say, let's, this is clearly not working out, what's a set of arrangement that's going to work? And if it might seem 12 months, right? But I guarantee you, if that person, your cost is going to be way more than 12 months.
Yeah. And you're cutting it off quickly, as you say. Get rid of the cancer.
Right? And you send a very clear signal to your team, right?
Yeah, I think one thing about our country also, we tend to be afraid of the consequences of the labor law. And there's always this assumption that it always favors the employee versus the employer.
Sure.
Hence, do we really want to go down that route? Kan? Yeah, and
But think of the culture in your team, right?
Yeah. Wow. So quickly, we've talked about the business plan. We've talked about the people.
Okay.
But I want to come into this part where I really laughed when I read it. Your thoughts about performance management appraisals.
Yes.
System.
Yes.
The bell curve.
Right.
The normal bell curve.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I spend a lot of time talking to leadership teams, boards, management. Every time I bring this up, everybody agrees. It is a farce, right? Everybody knows it doesn't work. So why do you still do it? Because that's how we always do things, right? You notice this common theme again. Why do you do annual planning? Because that's how we do things. Why do you do annual performance appraisals? The idea that you could, number one, here's my big thing. Performance management is crucial.
Okay.
Feedback is important.
Okay.
Right? But when you have this system where you're trying to rate someone relative to peers, and then have this thing called calibration, bell curve distribution, I need 10% in exceed expectations, 60% in meets expectations. You're somehow, people actually, statistically, that is not how performance is distributed. If anything, statistically, I think it is much closer to what's called a Poisson distribution rather than a bell curve distribution, which basically means roughly 90% of people, more than 90%, not 67%, 90% of people are actually about the same level. You're going to have a few outliers, your superstars, and a few outliers who don't really drag your team, right?
Okay.
When you see that, you realize, why are we putting so much effort on calibration when really it should be, guys, sink or swim, we're in this together, right? Everybody, same bonus, right? Based on how well this company or this business unit does.
As a whole.
As a whole. If you're a true superstar, right, I'm going to accelerate your growth and promotion. Right? I'm going to give you more opportunities, move up, your salary is going to increase, etc. Because you are truly making a 10x difference over the rest. But it's only 3 to 5% of people, right?
But that itself has to be measured, right?
This is so much more obvious, right?
Okay.
When people who are truly outstanding,
All
right?
right.
But the point is, you don't want to, this whole idea that you have this distribution curve, right? I have real life examples, right? For example, customer service, right? A customer service manager might say, oh, everybody is a 3 out of 5 unless you get a written compliment from a customer. But someone in safety or security goes, if there's no incidents, then everyone is a 5 out of 5. You see how, most functions outside of sales, you have this problem where it's very, you can't really calibrate it. And two, the problem also when you start to say, okay, if you hit these KPIs, you're going to get this rating. Guess what's going to happen? Everybody goes, oh, I don't want to work on that project. It doesn't add to my KPI. We start to develop silos. Right?
Yeah.
Instead of, sink or swim, we're in this together. Right? Versus, look, feedback, I'm going to tell you what your shortcomings are, what you need to do to get to that next level of promotion. I'm focusing on what's next versus looking backwards, what has already happened, right? If we instead remove all of that man hours that goes into ratings and committees and calibration and just focus on, developmental conversation, you probably use 10% of man hours. Everybody gets the same bonus, right? Because we're in this together. You create a completely different culture.
Everyone's in it together. And what about, I think there's another sore point about these annual appraisals is they come up with something at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, or maybe early in the following year, it's time to appraise.
Yes.
And that's where the difficult conversations come about, because there's no real justification. It's been too long.
And humans have something called recency bias.
Okay.
Right? Where the employee is frustrated, the boss doesn't remember what I did in January, in March, April, because the boss is nitpicking on the one thing that didn't go well in November,
Mm.
right? Because it's recency bias, right?
Recency bias.
And even if you do it half annually, some people try to do it quarterly. We're humans, right? We like and this is the thing. Remember interviewing, same thing with performance appraisal, right? I've actually gut feeling decided whether I like you on my team or not. So I'm only showcasing information that confirms my gut instinct or not. So humans, we're terrible at trying to assess. And you know how many managers are stressed out because their boss tells you, okay, you got 8 people in your team, only 1 or 2 can get this rating, and 6 or 7 must be in this rating. You must find. But what if, truly for most people, actually they're pretty good as a team, right? So all of that stress, and here's the question: does it really drive performance?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Does
Here's
it
the
really
thing we
drive?
need to really ask ourselves: all of the man hours you guys have invested in appraising and force ranking people, how has that driven performance?
Yeah.
And if you're honest, it
I
hasn't changed
I
performance.
think the challenge also is for large organizations. Maybe, if it's a smallish organization, numbers is relative, but where you can actually really hand on heart evaluate the performance of individuals versus these large organizations, multiple divisions and departments, and where you're trying to find some equity and trying to be transparent and all that. That's where this balanced scorecards and
Yeah, but that was Kaplan
Yes,
1990,
yeah.
Asman. That's why big organizations, there are global organizations, 100
Yeah.
over 1,000 employees are realizing now, since 5-7 years ago, we're ditching this annual performance appraisal.
Yeah.
We're focused on writing individual development plans. We're focused on making sure managers have one-on-one conversations once a month or at least once a quarter. Focus on what you need to do to grow. Are you developing to be a technical specialist? Are you developing to be a management? What kind of development areas you need? A lot of AI tools now, right? How do I customize and personalize your development journey? Focus on that for sure. But this idea that you rate people relative, force rank, bell curve,
yeah.
that's the part
Thing
that's
of the
really
past.
broken. And this
Yeah.
whole KPI obsession, which is looking backwards, right? Because when you're focused on outcomes, some of the decisions generally, the value from it is, there really isn't value to say kind of one department is better than the, just because they define their targets a certain way and they
Yeah.
negotiate
Yeah.
with whatever, right?
Yeah.
So why go through all of that? You know how many
Yeah.
man hours companies throw into this
And
process?
At the end of the day, no one is happy.
No one is
You can't
happy.
please everyone.
Right?
Yeah.
And let's say you rate this person 5 out of 5, right?
Yeah.
Next year the person says, I did the same thing.
Yeah.
How come this year I'm 4 out of 5?
Yeah.
Oh, our
Yeah.
expectations change. So even that 5 out of 5 person is still unhappy.
Goodness, okay. I may be landing myself in a spot of bother also because we have got, for example, long-term incentive plans, which are again longer horizon driven.
One quick point on that. If you
Okay.
long-term incentive plans can
Okay.
be great.
Okay.
But this is the one thing I really got from Tony Fernandez. He said, I don't believe in stock options. Because these long-term incentive plans,
Okay.
most of them are kind of stock options or
Okay.
stock-related options, right?
All right.
Which is, if it goes up, you get the upside.
Yes.
But if there's a downside, no skin of the
No
back of
skin.
the employee, right?
Okay.
He says, I want you to be a shareholder.
Wow.
Buy shares. Because if this token goes down, you're going to suffer.
You're gonna
And on
suffer.
top of that, it has to be really meaningful. So, berapa banyak you ada? Tak cukup lah. Okay, let me arrange a bank facility to buy shares. Because now, if the share price tanks, the bank's going to do a margin call. You're essentially betting on your future. That's when you have real skin in the game,
Yeah. Lah.
not stock options.
Okay. Okay. But that's also but again, I mean, it's a matter of being able to do it with conviction,
Yes.
right? Yeah. And it's, as you say, today is different. Okay, food for thought. Thank you. So, if it's not so much as the performance management system is a total waste of time, you can have some form, but it's got to be practical. It's got to be different from what it has been all this while.
Yeah. More feedback, more forward-looking, less individualized KPIs, and no force ranking.
No force ranking. Okay. All right. Food for thought. So everyone out there, I mean, it's a time of the year when you are looking at your performance appraisal of your employees in the company, and I sit on the NRC of my board also. So I think I'm gonna be forced to think about this again. Wow, Azran.
That's
I
my
mean,
job. I make people uncomfortable.
there's so much example. There's so many examples and insights that you have provided for in this book, and I'm sure the updated version is going to be even more. This book is still available.
Yeah, it's on my website.
Your website.
Probably Amazon.com is an easier way
Okay.
to immediately access it.
So we'll screen the link.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, thank you, Azran. This was meant to be a concise episode, straight to the point with your point of view, and we thank you once again. Thank you so much, bro, for your
Sure.
support, and and I really am happy that we've got you again. I really encourage for our viewers to really try to grab a hold of this book. Obviously Azran also he's a speaker every now and then in public forums, so you'll be talking on a variety of things. Maybe there are other parts of this, other stories of yours that
Yes.
one day I'd like to even invite you back.
Sounds good.
How is Naluri doing?
It's going well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Especially with international expansion. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And it's been how many years now? 7 years?
We're now entering our 8th year.
8th year. Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
And social health, mental wellness, employee mental wellness and health is such an important topic today.
And to now look at it not just as like a safety net or an employee benefit, but how do I use it to drive organizational performance? Right? Because when people are mentally fit, they're resilient, they're curious, they're agile, you're going to get a lot more from your team.
Maybe to round up this episode, if I can ask randomly, if there was one single area that your clients, your client corporations are looking at today in terms of improving health and mental wellness of the employees, what would it be?
Look, if there's one thing for me, it is shifting employee well-being from a reactive model
Okay.
to a proactive and predictive model. What I mean by that is the old reactive model is if you are distressed, if you are sick, here's the help you can go get, right? Or
Okay.
here's insurance, go to the hospital, go dial. That's reactive.
Okay.
But what if you actually quantify the state of mental fitness, the state of employee resilience and well-being, so that you can detect or keep that positive number to reduce the number of people who are going to be distressed. So take a proactive and predictive approach rather than a reactive approach.
Proactive and predictive approach.
Because now we can
Yes.
quantify mental fitness and resilience.
Wow. Well, this is certainly food for thought. Maybe there'll be an opportunity in future for us
Sounds
to
good.
invite you again
Yeah.
for that. Yeah. Okay. Azran, thank you so
Brilliant.
much. Really appreciate your time and wish you all the best for 2025.
Likewise for you too. Take care, coach.
Take care. So, thank you so much again for joining us. We like these episodes where they are straight to the point, food for thought. And if you're listening to this in the car on the way to office, please, take a lot of these pointers and as you plan the year ahead. We wish you well for 2025 and thank you once again for supporting us. Do remember to share these stories with your friends and colleagues and let's hope that support grows. So till we see you again, wish you well. Have a good week ahead. Assalamualaikum. Salam sejahtera.